Have you heard of Tunguska in Russia? This was the site of the last known large body impact on the Earth's surface, nearly 100 years ago. Or that's not strictly accurate. The meteor, which was an estimated 60 yards across, never actually touched down. The force of its entry, the compression and superheating of the air beneath it, caused it to explode some 25,000 feet above the ground. But then the term explode hardly does justice to the event. There was a detonation, a flash, a thunderclap, with a combustive power of 800 Hiroshima bombs. 30 miles away, reindeer in their loping herds were struck dead by the blast wave. And the clothes of a hunter another 30 miles beyond that burst into flame even as he was poleaxed to the ground. 700 square miles of Siberian forest were leveled in an instant. And this was only a rock. And it was only 60 yards across.
Preserved in amber, there exists a branch of time, an offshoot of a moment, an ant with a parasitic mite forever feasting, a screenshot of a thing most minute perturbing another, forever bound in a moment, a pantomime of endless yesterdays spanning 49 million years, resting in the isolation of abandoned sap. Things are permanent, moments spanning eternities are as close as we can get. Eternities are odd pockets of time filled with lint and forgotten receipts. Things are permanent, slowly forged and tempered in the curve of space upon time upon space. I wish I had a grander proclamation, a cutting critique, a pain burrowing ever deeper, but all my fear lies in the curve of a sheet being torn as we speak, in the weaving bits of the ephemeral and the interminable. What horrifies me most is that things are permanent.
On average, objects greater than 100 yards in diameter strike the planet once every 5,000 years, and asteroids half a mile across thunder down at intervals of 300,000 years. But when such a collision occurs, the explosion will be in the million megaton range and will cloak the atmosphere in dust, thrusting the entire planet into a deep freeze and effectively stifling all plant growth for a period of a year or more. There will be no crops, no forage, no sun.
What must it be like to be frozen in amber? To have every speck of your existence orbit around a singularity that lasted no more than an instant? I have to ask if that isn't the permanent, if the permanence of life doesn't mean to be frozen in form despite being ever moving. An obsession slowly forms, a tightening noose hanged on rafters made of the fleeting minutiae of things, an inescapable miasma of forlorn ifs and whys, a gnawing fear of the next bit of fabric that's ready to tear. All of it unforeseen. Life had, does, and will march forward, stomping its boots on the heads of every prediction I'll conjure, and yet I can't do the same. Mass, gravity, bends time, and a rounded orbit all which can't summon that same heft. They hurtle towards all which they've bent, marching into eternity at speeds the mind can't conjure, yet there they are, circuiting a trajectory of something much greater than themselves, frozen on a path seemingly predetermined, links on a chain much stronger than any of them. How humiliating it must be to be the weakest link on a chain you forged yourself.
I hear my wife say, "This is her mother," and then the bottom dropping out of her voice. "Is she?" The next 10 seconds are thunderous, cataclysmic. This is the true panic, the loss of faith and control, the punch to the heart, and the struggle for breath.
I suppose it's appropriate, when faced with the now ever-hastening stride of time, to freeze. To examine every nook and cranny of abandoned rooms, every inflection of interactions long cold, every wrinkle of the baubles of time littered in every odd angle of the mind. Scrutinize every last thread of memory. It will subside after this. There's nothing in any of these corners to be horrified of. This is, if anything, routine cleaning, just to throw aside all the things we don't need. But the mantra never works. And so your mind wanders, connecting one imaginary link to the other, slowly strengthening a chain made from what seems to you certain truth, until the very last link. It is now undeniable, unbreakable, and above all, frightening. But then you ask yourself, already aware of the answer, what are the chances of that anyway?
When it came down, day became night, and that night extended so far into the future that at least 75% of all known species were extinguished. Astrophysicists call such objects civilization enders and calculate the chances of a disaster of this magnitude will occur during any individual's lifetime at roughly 1 in 10,000. The same odds as dying in an auto accident in the next 6 months. Just tell me, I mutter out of breath. Just tell me and it's yours. And this is a prayer, the first in a long discontinuous string, addressed to whoever or whatever may be listening. My daughter, I say to the nurse at the admittance desk. They called. You called. She's been in an accident.
Denial is an oddity, not the opposite of acceptance, but the delaying of it. It too has its phases, its months and years and seasons that can only be chronicled by the pace of your orbit around whatever this is. Some calm summer days which take sudden shifts into violent winters. It is much more alive than acceptance, much more susceptible to the changes of its environment, reactive to its soils turning shades of its petals at the first signs of trouble. It needs to be tended to, secured and looked after. It is intelligent and devious. To pretend a sign of its disposal is to rein in its anger. Just don't think about it. Don't jinx this one.
If I claim Maddie as my own, and I'm making deals again, then I'm sure to jinx her. Because those powers that might or might not be, those gods of the infinite and the minute, will see how desperately I love her, and they'll take her away just to spite me for refusing to believe in them. Voodoo, hoodoo, Santeria, bless me, Father, for I have sinned.
It never really goes away. It fluctuates. People don't help, they distract. The denial fades, there's acceptance, despite how unwanted. There is still the flicker of I'm wrong, a joy in contradiction. The slow crawl towards answers that will never satiate, a nebulous embrace of the absurd. Not to discard with the weight, but to grow impatient of it. It shall arrive, but in the meantime...
The sheet draws back millimeter by millimeter, the slow striptease of death. And I can't do this. I can't. Until Maureen lunges forward and jerks the thing off in a single violent motion. It takes us a moment. The shock of the bloated and discolored flesh, the crusted mat of blood at the temple, and the rag of the hair. This obscene violation of everything we know and expect and love. Before the surge of joy hits us. Maddie is a redhead. This is not our daughter.
Things are permanent. A never-ending, unforeseeable chain of I should-haves. The things I've made are real, as real to me as anything material could be. They're a part of me, they breathe as deeply as I do, live with as much vigor, are as set within time as I am, as wrong as most any part of me, as susceptible to the many branching paths of this constant now as anything. In that chunk of the obvious took far too long to realize.
Flip a coin 10 times, and it could turn up heads 10 times in a row, or not once. The rock is coming, the new Chicxulub, hurtling through the dark and the cold to remake our fate. But not tonight. Not for me. For the Cherwins, it's already here.